Welcome to Public Comment. I'm John Dunbar, former mayor of Yountville.
And I'm Alfredo Petroza, former Napa County supervisor.
Join us as we talk about politics, people, and whatever else is on our mind. Unfair narrative to say it's environmentalists versus the wine industry.
We keep trying to defend something that's freaking broken.
Why do we have some of these regulations in place? And if people can't figure out why they're there, get rid of them.
We gave solutions today.
And I'm going to offer a few more. Alfredo, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, John, I think we should talk about just what's going on in the wine industry. And we've talked about this before, but I think there's so many current issues going on, current events, that I think it's worthy of having a conversation. It's fucked up, and I think we should talk about it.
I agree, certainly about the talking about it part and probably the fucked up part. There's a real struggle going on right now in the industry globally about wine consumption, alcohol consumption, but then looking locally, there are a lot of pressures on the industry, and that industry goes beyond winery owners and operators or vineyard growers. It involves so many different elements of our Napa County community.
Look, we can spend a lot of time on this subject, right? And we have, right? Whether it's, the World Health Organization or the Surgeon General providing their opinion that some of us weren't interested in, or at least me, right? And I say that because I think we tend to overreach. And right now we can't control that, right? I think what we're seeing locally is some of the litigation going on. And it really bothers me when it's vintner on vintner. Like, that's not okay. And we've seen that. And I think it's the tension that you and I helped mitigate when we were in office. And maybe now people are looking at it differently, but we did a lot to keep the peace. It took a lot of hard work, working with the left, working with the right, working with the environmentalists, working with the Wild Wild West to kind of keep it at bay. And now I think it's exposed of how hard it is to find that equilibrium. But I think it's genuine. I think people are suffering. It's hard. And when you're in the business and people just have this romantic view of it, not recognizing how fucking hard it is to make it, I think people are seeing that tension right now, and it's boiling up in litigation through civil, the courts and private parties taking on private parties, or, the counties, the county making some positions around, the WDO or how permits were interpreted. There's a lot on the pan, and I think it's getting hot.
Well, and you can tell just by all the documents I have in front of me. Normally I have maybe one sheet of paper, if anything, just to reference some of the regulation that exists here in Napa County. And it's not all unique to Napa County. Certainly every state in the United States has a wine country. Not all of them should, but they do exist throughout the U.S. But we are the premier destination for the entire United States and well beyond. The challenge we're seeing now is, I think, partly a generational shift to next generations of wine producers from the original folks that were in the 60s and 70s especially.
Like, are you talking about the business owners or the consumers?
I think it's a combination of all of it. It's, there have been wineries around here since the 1800s. And the way one produces wine, the way one sells wine, and who is consuming the wine has all changed over time. And so the problem is a lot of the regulations have not kept up.
I think you're right to end with the regulations, because I think that's what's causing the tension, right? As I'm not a vintner, I'm a grape grower. And you could argue, I don't care who drinks the wine, right? That's the vintner's job. And I say that pretty brassly, but, I look at the grower as, we want to make good grapes, right? And hopefully that translates into good wine. And I joke around that, but the relationships should be together, right? If a grower is successful, a vintner is successful. But if a vintner is successful, meaning if they can't sell their wine, growers are going to be in a pinch, right? So my relationship as a grower is directly tied to the success of a vintner being able to sell wine. I think the problem right now is you have these archaic regulations, and we're addressing it. You can mention the WDO, the Winery Definition Ordinance, or the Ag Preserve, and everyone's like, oh, don't mention, the Bible in the chapter. It's like, well, look, if we're all feeling the tension, it means it's not working. And I think we have to be open and honest with ourselves around, we keep trying to defend something that clearly is not working for the demands of today. Now, I'll be very clear. In my own view, I don't think wineries should be restaurants. I don't, right? I don't think wineries should be hotels. Do I think wineries should be able to see as many visitors as they can that's supported by their infrastructure? Absolutely. And the county should get out of the fucking way of counting how many people are going to it. That's setting someone up to fail. But there has to be a relationship, right? We have a healthy economy within our cities and town where we said, look, the balance we want is intense uses going to the cities, restaurants, hotels. County, you do ag, but the way that people do ag has to change. And we're not willing to adjust to that. And we keep trying to defend something that's freaking broken. And I think that's the tension you're seeing right now.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of really foundational documents, the Agricultural Preserve from 1968, which I think is a success.
But I think, we're mentioning that like everyone knows it, John. I think what we got to remember, defining the Ag Preserve, it was people coming together to protect land for agriculture.
Right.
Right. And putting some minimum parcel size that said, we're going to make sure that there's some minimum standards of how people get into the business. It created these scenic corridors around, it's Highway 29 and Silverado Trail. But it was the acknowledgement that our land is unique. It's special. Their terroir is different. And we're going to use it for agriculture. That's what the Ag Preserve did, right? It was a vote of the people like you and I that said, this is what we prioritize. But we keep pointing back to that, and we're not willing to kind of say, well, okay, I'm not saying that ag is not the highest and best use, but there has to be changes so that way people can continue to make sure agriculture continues to be the highest and best use.
I bring up the foundation of the Ag Preserve for a couple of reasons. One of them is there are some people that claim overdevelopment of wineries, overdevelopment or overproduction of vineyards, even though both are clearly agriculture. And the thing that people also associate with the Ag Preserve is, it's too much growth. We're losing all of our natural lands. That's bullshit. It's under 10% of the total land in the county is even planted to vines. And so it's a misconception that keeps getting propagated over and over again for an agenda that does not serve the community very well.
I don't think it's a misconception, though. I think it's intentional. I look at it, you have some environmentalists that don't want it to grow, and they keep saying this as something that sounds good, that sounds genuine. It's not. It's people trying to protect what they believe as they don't want Napa to change, whether they're not, because they're either not growers or they Johnny come lately and they don't like what they see. And that's not okay, right? And then to me, the other category is those that I got mine, I'm pulling the bridge up. And I have a real issue with that. Like, just because you have yours doesn't mean that you make it harder on other people. And that's what you're seeing. So I don't think it's that. I don't think it's like this overdevelopment, because your point, it's 10 fucking % of Napa County. How do you say that's overdevelopment?
It's worked. The controlled development over decades has worked. And that's what's really frustrating when people use that as a tool against the industry, saying, oh, they're destroying our natural land, our natural resources, taking all of the water. No, I think the worst greenhouse gas emission is hundreds of thousands of acres of wildfires that burn because some people say we should never cut down a tree, even though healthy forests require that. Some people claim vineyards accelerate fire. They do not. Ask any fire expert, not an environmentalist. Ask a fire expert how that works. So there are, when I call it misconceptions, I think because the public believes certain things that are presented to them by people, whether it's on the internet or in certain settings. They don't really follow it up to make sure that that's actually true. And that's part of the challenge. I think the narrative has been taken over by kind of an activist position of stop all growth, except for the house that I bought or built in the hillsides, stop all commercial activity. Except for the stuff that I want with my hiking trails and whatever else. So, and it's also an unfair narrative to say it's environmentalist versus the wine industry, because the wine industry, meaning the growers, producers, those that have invested their livelihoods in protecting and sustaining the land, are the best stewards of it. And so to say they're the reason that there are negative impacts is just not true.
Well, look, and we know that, right? The county does a water study, an annual report, right, that shows how many straws you have in the ground, what the recharge rate is. And when I was up there, I would say, look, I don't want you to paint me a rosy picture. I want you to paint me a factual picture. And when you have a healthy recharge, that's good. When you don't, you do something about it, right? But I think what's challenging though, John, is you do have the environmentalists, right? And those, you have them everywhere. But I think where they have been successful in Napa is they have done a great job of paralyzing the county, right? And they have done a great job of leaking over to some desperate venters that for whatever reason are agreeing with them, are funding them, empowering them to create more impediments and more roadblocks and restrictions on ag. But I think the problem, and like you and I are fault at, because it's not like we're enlightened all of a sudden. We were part of government, right? We had the ability to make change and we didn't, right? Especially me as a board of supervisor, I had an ability, 1 of 5 though, I had an ability to make changes, and it was hard. It was hard to propose things that, in my opinion, it wasn't about being pro-ag. It was about trying to search for how do you sustain this economy we have. And, we worked together, with folks that tried to create the white paper, which was a set of regulations that would help, the wine industry continue to be successful and sustainable. And it was just met with resistance. Well, we just can't open up the WDO because it was a dogfight last time. Oh, we're getting our ass kicked every time there's an appeal. So like, do you want the fight at one time or do you want the little fights? Pick. And I think right now you're seeing it's like everything is for a game, right? And I was looking at the agenda the other day for something, and it's like Water Audit California is appealing this. Water Audit California is appealing that. Like, that's the new game plan. And you're basically paralyzing the institution. That's not healthy, right?
No, and the most recent planning commission I just attended did approve a major modification to a long-standing winery. But of course, there was a 140 plus page document dump the day before.
Really? Didn't we talk about that before?
Well, it's happened repeatedly.
Shocking.
The same organization you just identified dropped that on the commission the day before the hearing.
Is that a fact? Was it really?
I was there and saw the document, and it was discussed about that document being dumped. 140 pages, a little over 140 pages. So it's happened repeatedly.
So how long was that project in the queue for?
I think it was 5 years, 6 years.
So 5 years, 6 years. And all of a sudden, 24 hours, 48 hours, I'm going to be generous, I'm going to round up. They saw.
No, it went out on the Monday before the meeting. On Monday night, I think, for the Wednesday.
Okay, so plus or minus.
Or Tuesday night.
Plus or minus 48 hours, they did a document dump. Yet the public record was there. So that, to me, again, questions like, so who are they? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to really protect Napa residents? Or are they trying to protect their own agenda?
Well, we know the answer to that.
I know, but like that's what we got to talk about. And why are not more people outraged by that? Right? I don't care if it's Darius Saturi or Joe Smith. They deserve a right to a fair process. And when they're not getting a right to a fair process, you got to call balls and strikes. And I feel like we're hesitant to call out it when other people are abusing the system. If it was you or me, guess what? They would create banners, they would create posters, they would create posts on social media. Oh, look at what they're doing. But yet they're playing by this rule book and no one calls them out on it. Like, I'm fundamentally just getting pissed off by how they act.
It's been happening repeatedly, and it's not just the special interest activist organizations that do this for a living, but you already touched on it. There are some high-profile, long-time vintners here that have decided that I think my opinion is, it's a business strategy. If you can make sure that no one else could plant vines, guess whose vines stay at a very, very high price?
But that's not okay. Like I have great.
Of course it's not okay. This valley was founded on collaboration, and that's not what's happening anymore.
I will tell you a quick story, right? I think I might have shared it on a podcast. I don't remember now, but I was harvesting a vineyard up in Coombsville, right? And I underestimated how many bins we needed, which won't surprise anyone because anytime I'm in charge of planning, things are going to go wrong. And I needed more bins. And I call a buddy who I knew was harvesting the night before. I was like, hey man, I'm short bins. This was at 2 a.m. So I'll be right over. I was like, why are you up at 2 a.m? But he brought over bins. Like that's the magic of friendship, of relationships, of people helping people. That is what this industry is about. But look, I think we've bitched enough about the naysayers. I think what I'm interested in talking about, John, is how do we challenge the industry, right? If you're a vintner fighting vintner, shame on you, right? Like not okay. I don't like that. And it shouldn't happen. Figure it out, right? You were a vintner. You are a vintner. Now you're challenging one another. That is not what this industry and what Napa Valley is about. But I do think it's a reflection that the way we regulate agriculture is fundamentally broken. And we got to peel the Band-Aid off and acknowledge we do need to make revisions to how we regulate the industry because it's leading to this tension that's manifesting today.
You know, the timing is interesting. Not only are there multiple lawsuits involving individual vintners, but also the county, because many in the industry have finally said, look, enough of this bullshit. We can't continue to tolerate the over-regulation and the significant burdens that get put in front of them to be successful. It's so counterproductive. It's not what this valley has been founded on. This valley is an ag valley, and its primary revenue generator, job generator, consumer product is wine. And why there is a group of folks that want to continue to try to derail that. And of course, as soon as they say, we're not against the wine industry, but
bullshit.
Yeah, there's always a but, right? And so the claim is you're not appreciating and respecting the environment. I call bullshit on that. That they absolutely are. And they are, the industry is evolving as, you know, whether it's vineyard plantings change, whether harvesting techniques change, certainly safety of workers has evolved, and just production in general. There's a learning process over decades that we have seen.
But those rules haven't changed though, John. They haven't
The rules haven't, and they haven't stayed up with, okay, now you don't have large distribution companies across the country selling everyone's product.
But we changed the rules are within our control though. Like I think I'm having a hard time because I was part of it that could have changed and I fought against it. So it's not as easy as we're just making it out to be, right? But I do think we have to acknowledge we control that, right? But I think when you say like the rules, I think we have to give an example, right? I went to lunch to my favorite restaurant today and there was open tables so they could seat me because there was open tables, right? They had plenty of parking. They had a septic system that allowed me to go there. If they were full, they would have turned me away or they would have told me to wait, right? That's how most businesses are.
All other businesses are.
So now you and I go to our favorite wineries. They have a permit, a piece of paper that says you can only see X amount of people. And let's just say it's 50 people per day. But they have the parking, they have the septic system, right? Everything. And say it's 3:00, right? A hypothetical situation. You and I show up and they're at 49 guests that day, right? But they have their employees there, the parking lot's empty, plenty of flushing the toilet capacity. Theoretically, what are they supposed to do?
Turn one of the two of you away.
Yeah, it's going to be you, right? but the whole point is that's foolish, right? We already drove to that winery. The impact's already there in quotes. But if they want to be good stewards of the rules, they have to turn us away. That is the regulations of today. So anyone that's listening, that's how crazy it is. Like we're telling people, turn them away, right? That's not what it was intended to be. And I can tell you because I spent hours looking at use permits and how we wrote use permits in 1990 to 1992 to 1980, not 80, but like 1990 and beyond. It's different. Every permit was different. But what I want to challenge the vintners in the industry is like, if you know it's broken, then you have to fix it. And how we're regulating ag and wine is broken. And it's manifesting today by the lawsuits. I think someone's in court today. Two vintners are fighting one another, right? Like that's unacceptable to me.
Well, it's even elevated to the federal level. And there are 3 wineries that are plaintiffs in a federal lawsuit about the constitutionality of all the regulations. I work with a group of vintners and we were advocating.
Tell me more. Yeah.
We're not talking about getting rid of all the rules. We're talking about using common sense to apply regulations. So for example, you identify having a visitor head count maximum that was in its origin supposed to control traffic. It never controlled traffic. Yet that restriction is still in winery use permits.
Can I pause just for a second? If you and I get Amazon deliveries, are we controlling traffic? Are we monitoring how many Amazon trucks coming up and down our driveway?
No.
Okay. But we're doing it
There is no other industry that's regulated that way.
Just so the public understands, but we're doing that to ag.
Yeah. And you're also how many employees you can have on property at any given time, because apparently the government, and granted, I've said before, I really learned over my tenure as an elected that I didn't know everything, because sometimes government officials think they know better than the people running their own businesses. And that's what we're seeing now.
What do you mean by employees? Just again, wineries.
If you want to add one more employee because you're being successful and it's not in your use permit, you can't do it. And then if you're found that you've added an employee because you, instead of 5, you have 6, you can be fined, and you can also have your use permit paused.
So let's walk that back, right? So say you're a successful winery and I'm just going with my friends, and you say I need more people. What that winery is supposed to do is say, I can't hire anyone right now, even though I'm slammed. I have to go get permission, submit an application, wait 30 to 60 days, do some studies, and then wait to see if they tell me it's okay. Like, that's what wineries have to do.
And potentially add parking spaces too. But, that goes to the infrastructure component that you mentioned already. And I think that's where some common sense has been shown and some fact-based regulations have been shown. Visitation, head count of employees, when it goes outside things like infrastructure, can you handle it with your parking? Can you handle it, like you said, with your health and safety issues? If you can say yes to all those things, then there shouldn't be an arbitrary, and it is very arbitrary, what kind of either visitor count or employee count you can have. You can have a winery that has 200 people a day right next to a winery that has 6 people a day because of when they went for their use permit or a modification. And talk about inconsistent application of the law. The law is probably not very good. But then you're applying it unevenly and unfairly. That just makes it worse.
Well, we're interjecting politics into it, right? To me, I remember the white paper, and it was, I forget when, it was a group of vintners. 2018, a group of vintners came together, and I was in the room. I remember that, right? And it's the things you do that you can say that. I was like, we shouldn't be the author, but we got to help create it because that's part of our job, right? Those of us that don't want credit for things, it's what we do. Some of us want to stand front and center, do a press conference. Those of us that want to get shit done, we don't, right? But it was an acknowledgement that things needed to change. And to me, it was the first time that I saw vintners willing to say, look, it's broken. And it goes into the premise of when we were debating through APAC, if you remember, the Agriculture Protection Advisory Committee that was set up to do nothing. We fought over the definition of ag at some point. And you had people that wanted to kind of create this hierarchy of needs, right? Agriculture is there to process grapes. Stop, first, base, nothing else. And I think that was true. I do believe back in the day, wineries existed for the production element. But now, if we're, again, common sense, do you want a winery making all their wine on the valley floor using groundwater if they can go out to a city corporate park and use city water for that? I would want that. Fundamentally, an environmentalist would want that. And maybe they make wineries smaller because they're going to be geared towards maybe smaller production, more tourism, because that's how they make money and that's how they can sell their wine. But right now, our rules don't allow that. A winery, 60% of its footprint has to be in production. 60%, right? We're forcing a winery to build bigger so they can show they're making wine there. Does the consumer really need to see that? Do we really need a winery using groundwater to make their wine when they can make it more efficiently somewhere else? That's the stuff that to me is we're trying to hold on to this vision of yesterday that's fundamentally broken. And we should be incentivizing wineries to locate out at corporate parks where they're using city services, right? You can talk about Camas, right? They were on the forefront of moving to Solano County, and they shouldn't have moved to Solano County. We should have kept them here. But the amount of trips they reduced by being able to locate somewhere else, right? Those are the benefits that Napa County can see, but we don't have a vision that is painting the Napa of tomorrow. And we allow organizations like Vision 2050 to say, here's the vision for Napa. And it's effective because there's no other alternative, right? And I think that's our fault for not creating another alternative.
Well, I just remembered another example that you were mentioning. A couple, Duckhorn recently went through a multi-year, very expensive major modification. One of the reasons that they were approved, that was given by the decision makers, was they were going to be eliminating truckloads of fruit that they were going to be able to produce on site. So they were actually going to reduce traffic, reduce greenhouse gas emissions with their off-site growing or producing, so they could do it on site. I mean, that's a smart and kind of practical solution that not only serves the wine industry, but it also is environmentally sensitive and sustainable. We need to have a balance, but right now there isn't even a balance. Now, every time there's an application or a modification request, not only is it fought and potentially appealed by an outside international or national special interest group, but there is no consideration for where the industry is today. When use permits were initially written, not only were they scattered all over the place, depending on what year and what staff was writing them, but they treat like I said, every winery has a unique set of circumstances. That's crazy. Do we do that with restaurants? Do we do that with clothing retail shops? Do we do that with any other place? No, you have health and safety regulations. You have infrastructure regulations. If your property has the capacity to operate the business that it's zoned for, all other industries are basically let to do that. But for some reason, the wine industry has become a unique and overregulated entity here in the Valley. There is no recognition of the burden that it's causing for like I said earlier, the largest job producer, the largest economic driver for this valley. And it's scary to see the real consequences of that, which are small families can't afford to keep their wineries operating or their vineyards growing. So they're having to sell often to somebody that isn't here, that might be a corporation or a private equity group. That's not exactly what we're looking for. We've talked before about really wanting to help protect and preserve local business ownership, but our laws aren't staying updated to help make that happen.
I like to provoke. So I'll tell you, there's a couple of things I think should be on the table, right? And it's not going to surprise some, but maybe some will. To your point, I think, and look, you're part of a group, John. Like, I think you can be part of the solution as well, because you have a group of vintners that I think are stepping up, and I want to congratulate them, because it's easy to sit on the sideline and do nothing versus those that want to step into it and do something about it, right? And I do think you need to look at production, right? Where people make wine, in terms of it doesn't need to be at their winery. If they have another facility in Napa, if it's at the airport park and they want to make the majority of their wine there, why do we care? Why do we require 60-40 rule where 60% of the production has to be at that winery? That's dumb, right? It's using less groundwater. Put that at the airport park. And we should incentivize that. Maybe there should be some tax breaks if we're doing that. It's creating use, right? It's creating property tax as well. It's creating jobs. That's one. The other one is visitation. Get out of the business of counting. Like, just stop. Treat them like a restaurant. Infrastructure. It's not the wild, wild west, but there's limits based off the infrastructure. Is it going to be hard? Yes. Is every permit going to be different? Yes. But suck it up. No one said it was going to be easy. So do it. And do it, whether it's an amnesty program or something, but you have to change the way we treat wineries so it's more sustainable. The other one is an experience. I think people have to experience wine differently. If you and I want to go on a quad and taste wine in the middle of a vineyard, we should be able to do it. And the fact that we don't allow people to create these differential experiences because you have to define the outdoor space is stupid. So if they want to go taste on the hillside, let them. If they want to go build a pergola on the, in between a vineyard so people can taste it, great. Power to them. They should be able to do that. The other one, this is going to be the controversial one, grape source. We allow people to use fruit from outside and still call it Napa Valley. And people might get pissed off and they may say, why are you saying that? I think if you want to protect the relationship between the vintner and the grower, you have to make sure you're protecting the grower as well. A lot of the stuff I said is to protect the vintner, because I do believe if the spigot of wine is not on, the spigot of being a grower is going to turn off too. But if you're going to turn on that spigot to sell wine and allow the wine experiences to change, you have to also protect the grower. And if you're bringing in fruit from another region and still calling it Napa Valley or selling it, I don't think that's okay. I'm not saying it should be 100%. What I mean by that is, you can bring outside fruit and still make it at the winery and so forth. And that's complicated. I'm oversimplifying it, but I think that has to be on the table. That's likely going to piss off some of our friends. But guess what? In the spirit of fairness and trying to solve this, I think you have to put a lot of stuff on the table to make it work.
The 5 major industry groups, Farm Bureau, grape growers, wine growers, vintners, Visit Napa Valley, they can do a much better job of not only representing their own memberships, not necessarily advocating project by project. I get it. We've heard that many times.
I don't get it, John. I don't get why they can't.
Some nonprofit organizations are not allowed to advocate.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That sounds like an excuse to me for getting it at it, for not wanting to do it.
With you, but even if that's the case, you can still advocate for your industry as a whole. And I don't see that happening with all our industry groups. They're also working really siloed in a lot of ways. You talk about the nexus between grape growers, wine growers, vintners, and those that are, selling our valley with travel destination. They need to be much more, I think, integrated and working together to support the industry as a whole. I don't see that happening. I do see it getting better. We've had roundtables with representatives from all the industry groups get together and talk about whether it's hotels, restaurants, wineries, or other hospitality-related businesses. Everyone is being impacted. Also, everyone's struggling to find workforce. So it gets complicated. Not only are the pressures coming from the industry, the wine industry, travel industry, all of that, but then you add on, where do you find talented workforce? Well, when you can't have housing that's affordable for workforce, that makes it difficult. So that's where it starts to really feed out into different tangents. But the core is the industry is overregulated. It's not the same as it was 50 years ago. And it shouldn't be the same as it was 50 years ago. It has evolved. Now, consumers demand experiences and having access to, thankfully, the Napa Valley, to come and see where the grapes are, to enjoy the natural beauty of this valley. And I'm sorry, I don't see the wine industry negatively impacting the environment. Because if somebody has an erosion control problem, the county, that's where the county can step in. We do not see rampant erosion problems with vineyard plantings and winery activity or ag in general. We just don't see it. And we also don't see,
it's a fact, by the way,
congestion problems purely based on visitors to wineries. What we do see is a lot of people coming in the morning to take their kids to school and maybe go work at whatever it might be, retail. It could be Costco. It could be wineries. It could be restaurants, hotels. But we are, in our core, a destination county. And I fully embrace that. I go back to the fact that if we were not principally and the highest and best use was agriculture, what would this valley look like? And you can just watch the video that the vintners have put out for many, many years. It would look like concrete, like Santa Clara County.
But I think we've used that, not that it's a threat, John, but that dichotomy, right, over and over again, and it doesn't work, right? And I'm frustrated, and I want to wrap this up before we spiral, right?
Well, this is also just an introduction to the topic, but we're going to have people come in and talk more about it.
But I'm tired of the narrative, right? And I'm tired of industry groups saying, we don't comment on individual projects. You are the fucking industry. Get over it. Because I've seen it when they want to comment, they comment. When they don't, they don't. So I'm not buying it. And I say that because they've built this. Like, I respect these groups because they've done phenomenal work. Like, I've seen them in action, right? What they've done to create, farm work education, what they've done to create the brand of Napa Valley. These groups have done a phenomenal job. Just leave the United States and see what the brand is. Built off the vintners that do hard work, but our trade groups have done a phenomenal job of creating brand. Stop being, you're getting beat up. You're going into a boxing match and you're fighting a heavyweight and you're scared to throw punches when they're trying to knock you out. Like, step up. Like, that's what's at stake. When you're seeing two vintners fight each other, what does that tell you? Like, it's time of crisis. So don't wait for someone to fix it, because I do think we enabled things and people and groups to be average because we were the best medicine to a problem. We fixed things. As elected officials, we're wired to fix things. We kept the peace at great length that people now are realizing, damn, it's hard. That's what we did. And they had a good job because there's people before us that did this exact same thing. I'm not criticizing the current electeds. I just think it's a different situation and everyone's realizing the new normal and everyone's saying, oh, fuck.
Well, I
Right.
also think that, one of the things that we
And I'm done.
Yeah, well, no, you're not done. I know that. Yeah, well, no, you're not done. I know that. One of the things we brought up before is offering solutions and not just pitching.
We gave
And
solutions today.
and I'm going to offer a few more, which is the industry should be providing guidance to the county and to the other industry groups together to say what are the highest priorities to protect your businesses and to be successful. And it's not counting heads of visitors per day.
But John, we've done that. Like enough.
No,
of
we
the,
haven't.
But enough of the round tables. And so put some shit on the table.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We are actively now working on changes to
Hallelujah.
the winery definition ordinance language.
Beautiful.
Working on clarifying, because some of the stuff is written so ambiguously. You can tell it was almost written by one lawyer just to confuse the other lawyer. But it's, why do we have some of these regulations in place?
Okay.
And if people can't figure out why they're there, get rid of them. And if they don't make sense, clarify them. Because right now we have industry people arguing over what is a trade tasting when people in the profession are coming to a winery to sample wine to see if they want to buy it for their wine shop, for their restaurant, for their hotel. And then people are saying, well, that's not a business tasting. That's a marketing event. Yeah. It's like, come on. That common sense is not being used.
If we're getting into the weeds of that, I mean, it goes back, John, it's broken. Like we're having staff and professional staff saying the definition of a trade tasting versus retail tasting versus a marketing event. Think about how tedious and dumb that sounds to the common person.
Yeah, but that's the reality.
That's what I'm saying.
That is the reality. Now, you could say just get rid of all the regulations.
We're not saying that, though.
No, you could, but I'm concerned. You made a point about nobody's willing to talk about the ag preserve, and I don't see us having to talk about the ag preserve so much as the WDO, the winery definition ordinance. Again, it treats one winery differently than another winery purely based on when they started operating. It doesn't even have to do with the size or the location necessarily. That alone is not fair. But then some of the regulations in place are so archaic. And it's clear that the county has not, in general, over the last couple decades, looked at those ordinances to see which ones are appropriate and which ones aren't. A fundamental, it might seem like a minor thing, but it's not. Fundamental challenge also, not only what is marketing of wine and what is the highest and best use of an ag zone property, is how do you decide what people can do with their product? Can they offer it to a consumer for no sale price? Or do they have to pay for it off-site? I mean, these are, again, the specific details that don't make any sense that should just be eliminated.
Yeah. Whether you're trying to talk about hoops or not, I don't want to, right? But look,
I wasn't in particular, but it happens.
But I think you're hitting to the point, and we're not going to solve it on this podcast, but I think we've provoked enough, John, to illustrate why this has to be addressed. And I think it's going to be groups like yours and others that say enough. Like, we're big boys and girls. This is our industry, and be proud of it. Like, just because you're fighting back the environmentalists doesn't mean that we're anti. It just means that you're defending what we have, which is an ag economy, and it's worth defending, right? So cooler heads can prevail, but it is worth fighting for. No, there's not going to be someone that comes in on a white horse and saves it. Like, you don't have that anymore. So it's your industry. You created it, own it, and create recommendations and hold the elected officials accountable, right? Because we all campaign on, we want equilibrium, we want sustainability. Let's see what we want and put it on their doorstep.
Yeah, I also want to see honest and factual engagement with those that feel like the wine industry is having a negative impact on the valley from an environmental and habitat protection standpoint. Those different perspectives, nobody's talking to each other. So I think that needs to be part of it. Otherwise, we're going to just keep seeing water audit file appeals, biological diversity file appeals against very legitimate businesses.
We've gone out of our way to create a playing field where everyone can participate. I'm tired of feeling like we have to overcompensate. Whether you're a pro business or not, This is your government. This is your county. Step up and lean into it, John. We created the Climate Action Committee, man. How many times did you see the folks that criticize us step into the committee meeting and provide solutions? How many times? Zero. If virtually
there were a couple of people that did it on a regular basis.
Okay. But my whole point is like,
but they were only complaining. They weren't really offering
but that's
solutions.
what I'm saying. So like, enough. Everyone, this is equal access government. Like, we don't have to bend over backwards to accommodate business nor the other side. I'm just saying play it fair and everyone step into it and lean into it. But enough of feeling guilty for having an economy that thrives. Like, goddamn, like this is a community where ag works and we're feeling like we can't fight for it. We can't jump in the ring and throw punches. If you're going to attack us, the collective us, it's worth defending. So that's my final is we have a cigar to smoke.
Well, more importantly, we have Napa Valley wine to drink.
There you go.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, John, I feel like I've ranted enough today, but I say that because I'm frustrated about not seeing outcomes, right? And look, I don't have a dog in this fight. You're working with vintners that are like-minded, that are trying to solve a problem. So, like, how do you get people to create meaningful outcomes?
That is what we're trying to do, is get a unified voice. And that's one of the challenges in an industry as, not only significant, but as large as the wine industry is in the Valley, is to get real clarity on priorities. But we're working on it. And I think we will see some really good ideas that are going to kind of percolate up from the meetings we are having. And I do think part of it is about honest conversation right now, but we have to follow it up with action. Absolutely.
And I hear you, right? But we've heard that before. Like, so what's different, John? And you have a unique perspective where you know our side, right? As an elected, right? So like, convince me on how it's going to be different this time, because we've done it. We've tried to do roundtables. We've tried to bring people together. The difference now is you have different people at the table, right?
That is part of it. I think having principals that are actually engaged and not just silent, because historically, you're right. The industry leaders, and I include the industry groups in that to a degree, haven't addressed this systemic kind of erosion of support and appreciation for the wine industry. So getting principals involved who have decades of experience here in the Valley that can really speak smartly to it. And the fact that they are engaged now, I would say it's later than it should be, but that's me on the sidelines saying that. That's not fair. But there is a recognition now that the wine industry cannot just be successful because it's the Napa Valley. And it used to be kind of that way. Now you have to really fight for it.
So are they willing to get in the ring and defend what Napa's about and defend agriculture?
Absolutely. And part of it is because they are fully invested in not only today, but the future of the Valley. And the future of the Napa Valley definitely includes agriculture and the wine industry.
Toast for that.
Cheers.